Hi, I'm Fran Wilde, and I'm reading from Chapter 10, Wandering Rocks. The Superior, the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., reset his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he came down the presbytery steps. 5 to 3, just nice time to walk to Arten. What was that boy's name again? Dignum, yes. Vere dignum et istutum est. Brother Swan was the person to see. Mr. Cunningham's letter, yes. Oblige him if possible. Good, practical Catholic, useful at mission time. A one-legged sailor, swinging himself onward by lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked short before the convent of the Sisters of Charity and held out a peaked cap for alms towards the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J. Father Conmee blessed him in the sun, for his purse held, he knew, 1 silver crown. Father Conmee crossed to Mountjoy Square. He thought, but not for long, of soldiers and sailors whose legs had been shot off by cannonballs, ending their days in some pauper ward, and of Cardinal Wolsey's words, "If I had served my God as I have served my King, he would not have abandoned me in my old days." He walked by the tree shade of sunny winking leaves, and towards him came the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, M.P. "Very well indeed, Father. And you, Father?" Father Conmee was wonderfully well indeed. He would go to Buxton probably for the waters. And her boys, were they getting on well at Belvedere? Was that so? Father Conmee was very glad indeed to hear that. And Mr. Sheehy himself? Still in London. The house was still sitting, to be sure it was. Beautiful weather it was. Delightful indeed. Yes, it was very probable that Father Bernard Vaughan would come again to preach. Oh, yes, a very great success. A wonderful man, really. Father Conmee was very glad to see the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, M.P., looking so well, and he begged to be remembered to Mr. David Sheehy, M.P. Yes, he would certainly call. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sheehy. Father Conmee doffed his silk hat and smiled as he took leave, at the jet beads of her mantilla ink shining in the sun, and smiled yet again in going. He had cleaned his teeth, he knew, with Argonaut paste. Father Conmee walked and, walking, smiled, for he thought on Father Bernard Vaughan's droll eyes and cockney voice. "Pilot, why don't you old back down that Allen mob?" A zealous man, however, really he was, and really did great good in his way, beyond a doubt. He loved Ireland, he said, and he loved the Irish. Of good family, too, would one think it? Welsh, were they not? Oh, lest he forget that letter to Father Provincial. Father Conmee stopped 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square. Yes, they were from Belvedere, the little house. Aha! And were they good boys at school? Oh, that was very good now. And what was his name? Jack Sohan. And his name? Gallagher. And the other little man? His name was Bruni Lynam. Oh, that was a very nice name to have. Father Conmee gave a letter from his breast to Master Bruni Lynam and pointed to the red pillar box at the corner of Fitzgibbon Street. "But mind you don't post yourself into the box, little man," he said. The boys sick-eyed Father Conmee and laughed. "Oh, sir." "Well, let me see if you can post a letter," Father Conmee said. Master Bruni Lynam ran across the road and put Father Conmee's letter to Father Provincial into the mouth of the bright red letterbox. Father Conmee smiled and nodded and smiled and walked along Mountjoy Square East. Mr. Dennis J. Maganini, professor of dancing, and etc., in silk hat, slate frock coat with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves, and pointed patent boots, walking with grave deportment, most respectfully took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Dingham's Court. Was that not Miss McGinnis? Miss McGinnis, stately, silver-haired, bowed to Father Conmee from the farther footpath along which she sailed, and Father Conmee smiled and saluted. How did she do? A fine carriage she had, like Mary, Queen of Scots, something. And to think that she was a pawnbroker. Well, now, what should he say, such a queenly mien. Father Conmee walked down Great Charles Street and glanced at the shut-up Free Church on his left. The Reverend T.R. Green, B.A., will, D.V., speak. The incumbent, they called him. He felt it incumbent on him to say a few words, but one should be charitable. Invincible ignorance. They acted according to their lights. Father Conmee turned the corner and walked along North Circular Road. It was a wonder that there was not a tram line in such an important thoroughfare. Surely there ought to be. A band of satcheled schoolboys crossed from Richmond Street. All raised untidy caps. Father Conmee greeted them more than once benignly. Christian brother boys. Father Conmee smelt incense on his right hand as he walked. St. Joseph's Church, Portland Row, for aged and virtuous females. Father Conmee raised his hat to the Blessed Sacrament, virtuous, but occasionally they were also bad-tempered. Near Aldborough House, Father Conmee thought of that spendthrift nobleman, and now it was an office or something. Father Conmee began to walk along the North Strand Road and was saluted by Mr. William Gallagher, who stood in the doorway of his shop. Father Conmee saluted Mr. William Gallagher and perceived the odors that came from bacon flitches and ample cools of butter. He passed Grogan's, the tobacconist, against which newsboards leaned and told of a dreadful catastrophe in New York. In America, those things were continually happening. Unfortunate people die like that, unprepared. Still, an act of perfect contrition. Father Conmee went by Daniel Bergen's public house, against the window of which two unlaboring men lounged. They saluted him and were saluted. Father Conmee passed H.J. O'Neill's funeral establishment, where Corny Kelleher toted figures in the daybook while he chewed a blade of hay. A constable on his beat saluted Father Conmee, and Father Conmee saluted the constable. In Euchstetter's, the pork butcher's, Father Conmee observed pig's puddings, white and black and red, lie neatly curled in tubes. Moored under the trees of Charleville Mall, Father Conmee saw a turf barge, a tow horse with a pendant head, a bargeman with a hat of dirty straw seated amidships, smoking and staring at a branch of poplar above him. It was idyllic, and Father Conmee reflected on the providence of the Creator who had made turf to be in bogs, whence men might dig it out and bring it to town and hamlet to make fires in the houses of poor people. On Newcomen Bridge, the very Reverend John Conmee, S.J. of St. Francis Xavier's Church, Upper Gardiner Street, stepped on an outward-bound tram. Off an outward-bound tram stepped the Reverend Nicholas Dudley, C.C. of St. Agatha's Church, North William Street, on to Newcomen Bridge. At Newcomen Bridge, Father Conmee stepped into an outward-bound tram, for he disliked to traverse on foot the dingy way past Mud Island. Father Conmee sat in a corner of the tramcar, a blue ticket tucked with care in the eye of one plump kid glove, while 4 shillings, a 6pence, and 5 pennies shooted from his other plump glove palm into his purse. Passing the Ivy Church, he reflected that the ticket inspector usually made his visit when one had carelessly thrown away the ticket. The solemnity of the occupants of the car seemed to Father Conmee excessive for a journey so short and cheap. Father Conmee liked cheerful decorum. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach in quarantine.